Hi, my name is Kimberly Connors and I'm a local archaeologist. For the last few years we've been doing a walking archaeology tour of South Acton, and today we invite you to come along with us. We're doing it on video to make it more accessible to everyone who wants to watch it, as well as document the sites forever on film. Ironwork Farm in Acton is a historical nonprofit that owns two historic buildings, the 1707 Faulkner House and 1732 Jones Tavern. They serve as stewards to these precious tangible assets to our past. The name Ironwork Farm remembers the 1,000-acre first English development of this area. It was done by the Concord Ironworks, and they used this area for fuel for the furnaces down at what is now the Damon Mills in West Concord, where they were trying to turn bog iron into iron and in steel. In fact, at that time, all of this was conquered. In 1701, two brothers, Ephraim and Samuel Jones, and their partner Jonathan Knight, purchased 600 acres to develop, and this is what was to become Mill Corner. Here we are at the intersection of High and Main Street. This was the first settlement here in Acton. Now you may have rushed over these roads trying to catch the commuter rail or sat in traffic on the bridge, but this area has always drawn people to it. Now before we leave the plaque, I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, the dates are wrong. It wasn't before 1700, it was after 1700. Also, the original occupants of the house and the builder was not the Faulkners, but one of the Jones brothers. Now, the last thing I want to point out is how the earth is building up around the base. This is the archaeological process of development and soils coming in and covering up things as they do. Let's go up the hill and see the oldest house in Acton. Jones Faulkner House is located at 5 High Street. The house was built in 1707 for Ephraim Jones and is the oldest building in Acton. It is one of the National Register of Historic Places buildings that Ironwork Farm owns. The building is often referred to as the Grand Manor House. As Mill Corner grew into a settlement, it served as the local garrison for protection during the Queen Anne War of 1702 to 1713. Today, it is known as the Faulkner House for good reason. There were 6 generations of the Faulkner family owned it for over 202 years. They were well-known manufacturers of cloth, public servants, and for their deeds in the Revolutionary and Civil Wars. The Faulkner who leased and then bought the manor and Mill Corner in 1742 was Ami Ruhama Faulkner. His mother was Abigail Dane Faulkner of Andover. She was accused and convicted of being a witch in the 1642 Salem witch trials. She was sentenced to death. It was said at the time that Ami saved his mother's life because not even the Puritans dared kill the witch's innocent babe. Here at Mill Corner, they took raw wool sheared from sheep and carded and spun the raw wool into yarns. Right here in the yarn, there were dyeing vats to turn the yarn beautiful natural colors. Now, there are lots of Revolutionary War era ties to the Faulkner house, but you'll have to visit it when it's open to hear the whole story of the prominent role this house played on April 18th, 1775. So now we are across Main Street, right by the little sewer hut, which is about at 110 Main Street. We're over here looking at the mill pond. And the reason they were so interested in this area was the Great Falls on the Great Brook. In order to turn a breastfed water wheel, you need a 6 to 9 foot drop. That they had here at the Great Falls. But they also had the ability to store water power by building a mill dam. We know in 1701 the first mill dam was built. It was made of mud and timbers, and they flooded the banks of the Great Brook, thereby storing the water so as that they could use it on demand and have a constant supply and not just had to wait for a rainfall. We know it remained being a mud sill dam until 1813, when it says in the Faulkner accounts that they repaired the dam with timbers. We are now at 113 Main Street, and from March 4th, 1702 to the present day, there has been a running enterprise on this site. First, it was Ephraim Jones's fulling mill. Today, it is Erickson's feed store, and this is the oldest establishment in all of Acton. One year after building the dam, they built the fulling mill. Ephraim Jones was the first owner, and the fulling mill was for the cottage industry of weaving textiles on home looms. When cloth comes off of a loom, it's very thin and the fibers are very loose. In order to make it warmer and more sturdy and waterproof, there was a wet process called fulling. They would take the cloth and put it through first a whirlpool, which was right about in the middle of the yard here at Erickson's, and then they would take it to the fulling mill themselves, which is the remains of which is are part of the Clabbett house behind me. It would go through rollers and it would be pounded. There's a great video of a Romanian fulling mill that's still in operation. We believe it would have been very similar to that, except for the type of pounding. It would have been done with the hammer style, which was very prevalent in England.
We're going to go now on the other side of the dam and see the rest of the archaeological remains. So here we are on the little bit of the remaining part of Main Street. Main Street originally went over the dam here at the Fulling Mill. The Mill Corner Dam was very well known. It was very common practice for roads to go over the top of dams. This road was in use all the way through 1906. In fact, I Am Work Farms has a really cool picture of a postcard that shows a trolley car coming right down this path that we're on right now. Here we are on the other side of the dam, looking at the back side of the remains of the Fulling Mill. Right here, the loosely put together granite blocks, I believe, date to the 1702 building. In front of it would have sat a mid-breast water wheel in a deep seat. Water would have been fed into it by wooden sluices coming from the top of the dam, and it would have fed it at a constant rate. Next to it, they built a grist mill, which was for grinding corn. Corn was the main staple in New England and the #1 ground product. This Fulling Mill was in use until the coming of the big mills, textile mills in Lowell during the Industrial Revolution, when it was refitted for other manufacturing uses, but continued to stay in business. As we said, there's still someone here after 320 years. They're not fulling anymore, but they're still doing business at this site. Opposite of the Fulling Mill was a sawmill. Now, the first sawmill was built in 1706 down by Parker and River Street. But by the 1730s, they moved it up here directly opposite from the Fulling Mill. You can just see the remains of the wheel housing, the rocks that would have buttressed the wheel housing down into the brook. This was a typical New England sawmill. They were called Sash Mills because literally, if you think of a window frame and sash that held a single blade, that was the type of saw it was. These were small enterprises, and they were the lifeblood of New England English towns. This enterprise would have gone all the way. They would have been milling and having wood to mill all the way up to what is today School Street. Think of all of the noise and the bustle and activity that would have been happening right here on this site. It is an amazing thing to imagine, and most people don't even know that it's here. Even if you're sitting at the light, you wouldn't realize that this is what you're looking at. So we walked back up Main Street, and now we're on Maple Street to our next stop on our archaeology tour, which is the Jones Tavern. This building is also on the National Register of Historic Places. And most people think of the Jones Tavern as the site that they see on Main Street. That's not the original side. If you want to see the whole thing, you come on over here to Maple Street and you can see the whole building. This is one of the gems of South Acton and a place where we have a lot of activities even now. We're going to walk back up over the bridge, and as we do so, you'll be able to see the tavern on your left-hand side. The land was a wedding gift in 1732 from Samuel Jones Sr. to Samuel Jones Jr. We know that by 1750, Samuel Jones Jr. had built a lean-to in the back, which served as a tavern and general store. This is thought to be the first store here in Acton. Now, on the Railroad Street side, that's where we are right now. This is the original front of the building. And right out on the corner, there was an 1814 penny found. There hasn't been a lot of archaeological change here, but this penny was thought by some to have been a token of good luck that they stuck in the wall when they were doing an extension and renovation. But I'm an archaeologist, and as a trained anthropologist, I like to think about the human side of things. I suggest that maybe they were pitching pennies after getting a few pints outside the pub, and one of the pennies got away. Here we are at our last stop on our walking tour. Believe it or not, we're at the Acton commuter rail parking lot. Here you can find the oldest archaeological assets in the whole town of Acton from the English settlement. Over my shoulder is the boundary marker that was originally the Major Simon Willard Grant. He was granted this for the peaceful negotiation of the settlement of Concord. A reminder, once again, this was all Concord at the time. That same boundary marker was the one that was part of the purchase of the Concord Iron Works of this farm area and of the Jones brothers and Jonathan Knight in 1701. On the other side of the parking lot, you can find a 4-course boundary wall. I believe this was all part of the same boundary system, but that's abandoned on this side. Whereas on this side, people are still using it as their boundary markers. You can see the surveyor's tape out there, and I'm sure it's still in their title documents. Ironwork Farm thanks you for spending this time with us today, walking in South Acton. Please visit our website and see when our openings are going to be happening and any other great information about the history of South Acton. We would like to thank Acton Boxborough Cultural Council for the generous grant that made this video possible. Also, ActonTV for their wonderful help and assistance in seeing our vision come true. And Erickson's Grain Mill for welcoming us onto their site as they always do. My name is Kimberly Connors. I'm a local archaeologist, and thank you very much for spending your time at Mills Corner.